Hi everybody, and apologies for not attending this meeting, but I have another conference in the United States at the same time. However, thanks to Chris Bowden that led me to send you this video with this presentation that I hope you will find it interesting. I'm gonna speak not only about electrocution and collisions, but the impacts of infrastructures on vultures. We have different threats or opportunities to preserve vultures or to save them from threats. I will refer to wind farms and power lines, roads, railways, aircraft, and rubbish dumps. First of all, we have to be aware of the critically endangered status of the Indian vultures that you perfectly know. And here you have pictures of vultures in Europe colliding with wind energy. Wind energy has been developed greatly over the past years, but mainly two countries in Asia, India with 25,000 megawatts and China with 65,000 megawatts, are ahead of other countries in the region. So it's very important to know what are the impacts on birds and bats of this kind of energy. For India, there is still not enough information about the impact on birds. And here we have a paper that demonstrates that impacts exist, and at least 4 or 5 collisions have been recorded already. But more work needs to be done. So for comparisons with for vultures, I will refer to the stronghold of vultures in Europe, that is Spain. Here you have the squares of the distribution of vultures in the Iberian Peninsula and 3 regions with wind farm energy called A, B, and C. So we have studied these areas A, B, and C, and you can see the number of wind farms we have been sampling, the number of turbines, and how many turbines in this region have been sampled. Below, you can see how many collisions have been recorded for the 6 species of vultures we have currently in Spain. We have to add the white-backed African white-backed vulture and the Roppel's griffon that already exist in Spain, at least in southern Spain, and a few numbers have collided despite the scarcity of birds. For the region C, you can see 1993, 2016, 88% of the birds we have recorded belong to the period 2005-2016. So you can imagine how many birds die per year. But these are raw figures. So turn this into fatality rates. And here you have the same figure about wind farms and turbines. And you can see the fatality rates range between 0.18, 0.15, 0.36. But for the region B, you can see a very low fatality rate. This is because there are no vultures in the area, so they are mostly vagrant. But overall, we have calculated that in Spain, every year, nearly 1,000 vultures are killed by wind turbines. So you can imagine how the potential impact it could be in other regions, as in Asia or India, where they are critically endangered as compared to Europe, then they are mostly less concerned for the griffon vulture, or vulnerable at the case of the Egyptian vulture. There are other countries in Europe with vultures also, but the numbers in other countries are not so high. As you can see, France, only 3 griffons, Greece, a handful of them, Bulgaria 1, and Portugal 3. One of the main problems of this wind development is the pre-construction studies. There is a lot of drawings without any meaning, as you can see here. I am working now in Asia, in India, and other countries, and there is a lack of information or lack of a good methodology for the pre-construction studies that make very difficult to estimate the potential impact wind energy may have on vultures. Another important thing is when the wind farm has been built, how long the post-construction monitoring takes place. Many wind farms in Spain stop after 3 or 5 years But here you can see, it's a paper we published about the Egyptian vulture, that the long-term monitoring is a key issue to understand the impact of wind energy on birds. This is the numbers of Egyptian vultures killed by wind turbines, and between brackets you can see the number of breeding pairs on each region. For one highlighted, 2005, 2012, most of the collisions occur after 5-6 years the wind farms have been built. So it's not enough to have 3, 5, or 1-2 years of post-construction monitoring. It must be required a long-term post-construction to have a good picture about the wind energy impacts. Now we are moving to electrocutions. From left to right, we have Jordan, we have South Africa, and we have Spain. Impacts of power lines may be negative or positive, as you have the nests of the eagles, the white stork, or the perching for the steppe eagles during migration. One of the main studies was made in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, by people from the United States and India, near Jurbir dumping site, where they were monitoring power lines along different rural routes in India. Here you can see the 89 carcasses they found. Fortunately, they didn't find any vulture, but house surveys were restricted to public access along public roads, and undisturbed habitat was not sampled. So we need to do right sampling methodologies and sampling in the right sites to know how the impact on birds, and especially on vultures, may be. Continuing with power line electrocutions, this is a very difficult subject to cover because the power lines are extended over a huge landscape. So we must work against electrocution and collisions. Good questions. We need baseline information about the populations, about the movement of the populations, where do they go, where do they feed, and how do they move in the landscape. Then we have to prioritize areas where to sampling for electrocution and collisions. So we have to establish a methodology, a database, working together with stakeholders, NGOs, governments, and companies, where to focus all the efforts to spend the money and to do the work in the proper way. Of course, we need a law enforcement for the new wind power lines to be built and to correct the old ones. A very important issue recently in Spain. Here you can see one of the papers related with the effect of correcting wind power lines on birds. This is for Spanish imperial eagle. After correcting the power lines, the black arrow downside, the population has greatly increased in a protected area in southern Spain. Here is another case in Morocco where Spanish imperial eagles migrating into Africa have been found to be electrocuted in a certain area in Morocco. So all the efforts of conservation are being made in Spain, but the electrocutions also occur outside the range of the species in another different country. So cooperation is also a must for this issue. And also I was referring to the old power lines. Here you can see the yellow arrows, how already corrected or mitigated in the past now become again threatening the birds, because the measures were taken, but now they fail again because they have suffered some use over the time, so they are not working anymore. So they must be revisited and corrected again. Also, you will refer here briefly, probably because Dr. Stathisan is present, about the impact of vultures with aircraft. It's not a problem for the vultures, but it's a problem for the aircraft because the amount of money it costs. On the right side, you can see a black vulture that collided recently in Mallorca airport in this summer, that took the plane to stay for 2 days before repairing. Here, for a small aircraft, is even a more serious problem because it causes human fatalities. And we have, over the last years, despite the trend in the red line is decreasing, in the past year we had 4 cases in Spain that For the media, were very alarming, saying that now the vultures they are a problem for the people because of that reason. Also, railways have been a case of collisions with birds, but mostly in these cases it has been related with carcasses on the railway, so it's not really a serious concern unless there is a lot of livestock near the railways. And also on the roads, it has been highlighted in other meetings, like in Senegal 2 months ago, and also in the Spanish meeting was highlighted as a possible threat of roadkill of vultures. But this is also a problem for the humans, for the big size of the vultures. And finally, this is a work we made for the Eastern Mediterranean flyway. The rubbish dumps may contribute also to preserve the vultures, but on the other side, if the rubbish is not properly managed, it may endanger a species. So we published together with BirdLife the waste management best practices and impact to conserve migratory and soaring birds in the Rift Valley Red Sea flyway. But all I have been talking about, they interact in between rubbish dumps, aircrafts, wind farms, power lines, etc. So this is a case of a wind farm and the rubbish dump to the left in the picture, where the wind farm killed a lot of birds, 365 in 3 months, vultures, because there was no food available and they went to the rubbish dump for feeding. And this is the case of another rubbish dump near a power line that, despite the mitigation, as you can see on the cables and the masts, collisions still occur near this rubbish dump because it's very close to the site. So, what we need to know, finally, is the effect of impact on populations. It seems, for example, that in Spain, despite the high amount of birds dying, the populations are still healthy, but we need to monitor such populations. So, the research methods are not standardized, so we need to have good indicators about this impact on populations, on fatality rates, and so on. A very important thing is the environmental, social, and impact assessment need to be of good quality. And I would like to insist here in Asia, because there is a must for the vultures to do a proper analysis when all these aspects, food, colonies, feeding, movements, have to be taken into account together with human population and human livestock management, rubbish management, etc. So, we need a lot of supervision of the mitigation measures proposed for these studies, or the offsets afterward that are proposed, that they must be really, or they must contribute to preserve the vultures and the species for their planet or for. This is the case of laws, regulations, and requirements. Worldwide, there are several regulations that, when these projects are being carried out, at the Performance Standard 6 of the World Bank, or the Principles of Equator, that is a consortium of 28 banks all over the world. But in the case of the European Union, there are some other regulations that you can check in the websites. So law enforcement in every country, in regions, are also another thing to be considered about. And finally, I want to thank you again. Sorry for this fast presentation, but I hope it will contribute to your decisions on evaluating the threats, on the opportunities for the vultures in Asia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, all of you, because I would like to be here with you, but it has been impossible for me.